My name is David Connect. I am a account representative for Augsburg Fortress. I do a lot of webinars for them in terms of, mostly in terms of curriculum, but I also do webinars for Sundays and Seasons. Maybe we've encountered one another in the past in that capacity. And I'm privileged to be able to help out with this very unique situation, namely the 2020 Augsburg Fortress Summer Music Clinic, online Summer Music Clinic. And thank you for your participation and your patience and your affirmation. Wow, we got a lot of wonderful affirmation after the first session. So we're really working hard to provide something significant for you all, and I'm sure that's going to be the case this afternoon. I do want to say one thing. We're not anticipating getting Zoom bombed in any way, but if we do, please know we've done everything we can ahead of time to protect our meetings. But if for some reason we do, I will immediately end the meeting. So if anything happens untoward, this meeting is just going to stop. You know, it's kind of a tough thing to keep an eye on, but we'll do our best to do that because we certainly want this to be a safe environment and a friendly environment and a edifying environment for everyone. And with that, Jane, I'm gonna turn it over to you for a little bit, and maybe you could talk about how we're going to go forward with this and our presenters.
Okay, thank you, David. And David has done just remarkable amounts of work to make this happen. He's kind of our webinar guru, and the music team all felt a whole lot better when we brought him on board to help us out with this. But let's get started. Welcome to our afternoon session, which is a conversation with John Ferguson and Chris Aspaas, reflections on the ever-changing role of the church musician. Those of you who were here this morning heard John introduce us to new publications for organ and piano. If you missed that session, it will be available later this week, and we are recording everything today and tomorrow. You'll receive a link later to that recording. But now we're going to tap into John's wealth of experience and expertise and thoughts on his career and philosophy of church music. And in addition, we get Chris Aspaas joining us from Texas Christian University in Texas, where he is the director of choral activities. However, Chris and John's path intersected a number of years ago when they were both on the music faculty of St. Olaf. They were a summer team for Augsburg Fortress back in 2011, and we are happy to have them together again. They are both eloquent, lively, and inspiring speakers. And whereas this will start as a quasi-interview by Chris of Ferg's years in church music and as an educator, we want to hear from all of you and invite you to send your comments and especially your questions via the chat box. So once again, let's have a little virtual clapping for John and Chris.
Well, greetings from Texas, the great Republic of Texas. It's a cool day here at 91 degrees. And considering we've been topping 100 for the last couple of weeks, it is well received. My wife and one of our kids is actually headed up to Minnesota here pretty soon to try and beat the heat for a couple of days and visit some friends. And so John and I had the joy of working together at St. Olaf College and the Augsburg Fortress workshops, obviously in 2011. I can't believe it was almost 10 years ago. But as a student at St. Olaf, I also knew Ferg. First I knew of Ferg. And then I saw Ferg, and then I sang for Ferg at Christmas festivals and obviously Sunday worship in Bow Chapel. It's been a wonderful relationship that developed. At first, when I was a student, I was kind of scared of him because he always has a place to go, very directly, very quickly, and oftentimes looks very, very focused. And at first I didn't understand that he's not angry, he's just focused, and actually a tremendously joyful individual, who even in the face of disaster, my very first day of work at St. Olaf College, Bow Chapel was struck by lightning, and it fried the organ that we were supposed to use for the first worship of the semester for my first set of duties. And he walked out of the inner workings and with some fried wires in his hands and said, "Well, it's dead." And then we just started. I had no idea what to do. He says, "Well, here we go. Let's try this." And so we did, and that was the beginning. And so we've talked about some questions to try and lead the conversation. But I've become a fan of podcasts. I have for a couple of years, but boy. If you're not listening to podcasts, there's so many brilliant people out there. Brene Brown has a new podcast, which is fantastic. They're just great people who are thinking great things and talking with great people, and it's worth time. But Brene Brown, I'm going to steal from her. She begins every podcast the same way with every guest. And so she asks, "How are you?" Ferg, how are you?
Well, I'm fine. And I've been sitting here really enjoying your discussion about me and my intensity or my focus or whatever. I'm doing fine. I should tell you that I'm retired, of course, and have not had a church job until 3 years ago. And this was very interesting because the organist at Normandale Lutheran in Edina, a suburb of the Twin Cities, where I am now playing, the organist had been there for 32 years. And he was amazing. He was a cardiac surgeon and highly respected in his professional field, but his delight was playing the organ, and his hymn playing was superb, which meant that that congregation just can sing because they've had 32 years of great leadership from a fine, fine hymn player. Anyways, he had a stroke in May, very much wanted to come back, and it became very clear that that was not going to work. So at the end of August, they called me up in desperation and said, "Are you free by any chance? Could you come and help us out and be our interim organist while we figure out what we're going to do?" Well, I was free, and I said yes. And I'm now in my third year. And jokingly, this past year, the director of music and worship, David Clark, said that he thought they should add one more word to my title. So I'm now the permanent interim organist. And I don't know how long that will last, but I'm having a ball. The church really cares about music. They have been willing to invest in it, both the talent and the financial resources of the congregation. And I could tell you wonderful stories about buying a new 7-foot Steinway, and the $105,000 tag was paid for in 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon when we were all at the Steinway place playing pianos and this kind of thing. So the church is well endowed, but they have used their endowment so well. They own 3 houses in the inner city, staff them, including a clinical psychologist skilled in helping people discern their vocation. In the years I've been there, they've sent medical missionary teams across to India with all the people in the team being from the congregation. So they're not just spending money on themselves. They're an amazing place. So it's been a real delight. And the musicians are fabulous, and David has built an incredible tradition, so the depth of talent is really wonderful. And I'm going to stop jabbering about that, but so you asked the question, I'm answering. What I would like to do, though, before you hit me with another one, I've been thinking again about sacred music and church music. And I think it's interesting, again, to remind each other that sacred music is music with a sacred text. Some of it has its place in the church. Much of it has its place in the concert hall. Church music is music that was designed and intended to be used in collaboration with, in support of worship. And that's a different thing. And sometimes a piece of music fits both. Bach's cantatas, when Bach wrote his church cantatas, were church music because they were for Sunday morning Hauptgottesdienst, the highest and most important Sunday service. in church. And the preacher preached for 30 minutes or so, and then we had a cantata. And that was part of the unpacking of the word. And the service didn't take just 55 minutes or 45 on a football Sunday. No, it was quite different. And nowadays, if we do a Bach cantata, most of the time in a church, it's really sacred music because it's not a part of a service. And even if it is a part of a service, it would be done uniquely. So it's not part of the regular whoop and wharf of what we would do. We don't do one every week. So I think it's interesting to think about this. And now that we are in the middle of a real huge and serious challenge to all music makers, well, to all of us, but especially music makers, especially singers, although wind players have some issues too about this business with their spit, if you'll pardon the expression. So we have a new challenge to sort through. So what is COVID-19 music? What is COVID-19 church music? And maybe even more than what's happening right now, what will COVID-19 church music be coming the fall and into the next year until we have a vaccine and enough people are vaccinated that we have this safe cohort that we need so that the life can come much back closer to normal. So it's an interesting thing to look back to see, think about the differences between these kinds of music and let that be a springboard for us to think about what we need to be doing or should be or can be doing now. How will a congregation sing? Will they be allowed to sing? Even if they're allowed to sing, should they sing? And if so, how? So there's one question that's before us. So anyways, that's enough for now. Your turn.
I think we can always count on you for inspiring and informative and humorous interjections. So you mentioned a word vocation pretty early on, and you and I have had a lot of discussions about this, and I think this is maybe at the core of why we're all here. 6 pages worth of faces and the little Brady Bunch screen here. And so the place where I'd love to start is with how training as a church musician was for you when it was your time, and how training for a church musician might be different today and maybe tomorrow, next year, 10 years from now.
Well, I think you can get a sense of how I was trained as a church musician, academically speaking, by telling you about my church service playing class at Oberlin. It was a 2-semester long experience. We spent the whole first semester translating Dom Bédot's famous French book on the art of organ building in the 1800s. And we spent the whole semester doing that. That's all we did. Now you tell me what that has to do with church music, in a sense even church music when he was writing it in 1800. But that's what we did. Second semester we actually did spend 2 weeks on how to play Anglican chant. I don't remember anything else from the other semester. That was it. Now, I had training in techniques. Excellent experience choral conducting at Oberlin with Robert Fountain. Just really, really fine. And singing in the choir, of course, was a wonderful way to learn about choral conducting. And we were fortunate as a choir to sing with Robert Shaw, too, and Cleveland Orchestra and stuff like this. So I could have learned by observing and learned by doing and seeing how I was reacting to the information, the gestures that the conductors were doing. So I suppose you can call that training in one of the techniques a church musician needs to use. But there was no training in vocation, in the sense of what does it mean to be a church musician? When are your skill sets as a musician actually in the way? Or when do they need to be modified so that you can use them in the context of the worship life of the church? And that's a whole different thing. And then we start talking about servanthood and servitude. And I love Dorothy Sayers. I'm a great fan of mysteries. Dorothy Sayers and her detective, Lord Peter Wimsey, who was fabulously wealthy so he could exercise his hobby of being a detective because he didn't have to go to work. And then he also collected rare books. So in the first of the books that Dorothy Sayers wrote about Lord Peter, she wanted to introduce her characters, and she very wisely didn't describe them. No, she created scenarios in which their characteristics became quite clear. And the one that to me is so interesting is the relationship between Lord Peter and his butler, Bunter. Bunter, what a wonderful name. I wish I'd had the guts to name my kid Bunter, but no, I don't think we did that, no. And I don't know what Christopher would say now, even though he is teaching British history, so there's a little, something there. Anyways, Lord Peter had been really busy all morning out detecting, and he came rushing into his flat at Piccadilly Square, and Bunter was waiting for him. And he said, "My lord, the catalog and your clothes to wear for the rare book auction is in your dressing room." And Peter said, "I don't have time for that. Just go get the catalog. I'm running late. I've got to get going." And Bunter said, "No, I'm sorry, my lord. Your clothes is down the hall, right where it should be." And Bunter and Whimsy sort of went back and forth for a little bit until Whimsy finally said, "Bunter, Bunter, what would I do without you?" as he rushed down the hall to change clothes. Bunter was Lord Peter's servant, but in a sense, that scenario proved he was not in servitude. So there's a difference. And this is, I think, part of the difficult role we have to hold, in that there are going to be times when we have to decide if we are going to compromise our standards musically, maybe even sometimes ethically, although that bothers me even more, but we're going to have to compromise our standards because of the situation, or because of the pastor, who'd really like to sing this hymn, even though you're not even sure you'd like to play it, let alone have everybody sing it. So this is an interesting thing to think about. And that kind of thing no one ever did with me, ever. And that's the kind of thing that I found myself pondering and trying then to decide how I could bring that into a teaching situation, where the course that we called Church Music Practicum included a 3-week session involving everyone in the classroom applying to an imaginary church. And they did the whole application, wrote their application essay and everything. And then I invited in friends from the town, pastor, member of choir, someone else who maybe it was the organist, whatever, and they interviewed my students as if they were candidates for the position. And wow, you should have seen the big eyes on the kids when the interviewers started to ask questions of the interviewees, asking questions about things that will come up that the kids had never, ever even thought of. And I've had graduates write to me and say, "Oh, they just got this job, and thank goodness for that day I was interviewed back in class." And even to the point where one person wrote to me and said, they asked me a question, and I broke out laughing. And they said, "Well, that question wasn't funny, was it?" And she had to explain that, no, this was because the question was almost literally one of the ones that was asked her during the interview sessions. But in the process of all of this, we're learning what the concerns are and what the parameters are, and this is what we need to do. So I think the teaching of vocation is something new. I know it's being done other places, and people talk about it. We've talked about it with colleagues. So that represents, I think, a radical change. I think more of an understanding about church music as a goal and as a worthwhile goal. And people at places like, while I was doing my DMA at Eastman, one afternoon I was sitting in the hall outside where all the practice rooms are, waiting for my turn. And somebody came by and plopped down, and we started talking. And this person said to me, "Well, Ferguson, you really can play well. I don't know why you're always talking about being a church musician. You don't have to talk about that. You can play." And of course, the implication was that if you're a church musician, that's a second-rate kind of thing. You don't have to have as much ability or whatever. No, that's not true at all, as far as I'm concerned. We all should be doing our best and striving to get better. But on the other hand, the way we do it might be quite different. And that's where the vocation part comes in.
You talked about servanthood, and I think for me, last spring when we stopped, and I could probably share, this is probably something that everyone on this call and thousands of others, I think many of us live in servanthood, in making music and leading, and all of a sudden I felt like all I was doing was serving, but there was nothing coming back at me. It was all one way through a screen and a microphone. And the joy of gathering with my singers, with my students, with my collaborators in this, there was such distance to it. And I know that many of us are fearful about that moving forward. How many of our collaborators will choose to stay on the other side of the screen? How many of our parishes won't even let us ask the question? And so finding more inspiration, more ways to connect, more ways to stay alive and whole, so that we can continue to serve. I think early on I heard someone say, we can't recreate what we had. We can only create forward. And there is something to that I think I know I spent a couple of months staying in the desire to recreate, to get back what we had. And again, even moving forward this fall, it's not going to be the same. My singers will come back to campus, but it's not going to be the same. We have to be safe. We have to work together. We have to find different solutions. So I appreciate you talking about servanthood, because I think one of the things is that I get joy out of service, and service with, and I think it's about restructuring how that's going to look and feel and sound, especially when we're all trying to figure out the technology every day, something new. So another question that might be related, and maybe is as things continue to change and shift, and obviously this is a complete season of shift. How do you think we should? What are ways you think we can continue, or how are you continuing to prepare for these changes? How do you teach yourself? How are you moving forward with this?
That's a very good question. And at Normandale, we are not doing a video of worship. We're not doing a typical Sunday morning Holy Communion liturgy, just in an empty church with the leadership, and then sending it out. We are doing a television show, a variety show, whatever you want to call it. For example, on Easter Sunday morning, the children's sermon was done from a farm in Northfield, rural Northfield, with one of the associate pastors, his 1.5-year-old son, and a 1-day-old lamb. And so that was the kind of thing that you more likely wouldn't be able to do in the church itself, but there he was. One Sunday, things in the lesson involved rivers and waters, so one of the pastors preached partially in waders in a stream. And again, that's not something you're going to do. So then what about the music? Well, we have, as I noticed someone else, Lenora McCloskey was talking about how they have 4 singers, I think it is, who sing the hymns. That's what we're doing at Normandale, 4 people from the adult choir. I've had to completely rethink how I play the hymns, because how can I play, let's say, Holy, 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 or Praise to the Lord the Almighty, with the combination of stops I would usually use for a full congregation with just 4 people singing, unless we have them on top of a microphone and have the organ damped down as far as how much of the sound is being heard. So should we do that, which is very artificial, really? Or should I completely change and play differently? registrate differently so that in this particular context, it seems very normal. So there's one of the questions I've been wrestling with. I have, pardon me, I have a fabulous associate keyboardist. And I say keyboardist because she's the associate organist, but what she really is the accompanist for the choirs. And she's a superb musician. And she's a fabulous pianist, very sensitive musically. Lorna loves to do piano and organ duets. I grew up in a Baptist church. I know all about that, but I have not done piano and organ duets in years. And we're doing piano and organ duets. We just did an absolutely wonderful arrangement, not by me, and I don't remember the guy's name right now, of Amazing Grace, and that'll be the prelude on one of the next Sundays. And it never occurred to me in starting at Normandale that I was going to end up playing piano and organ duets, but I am, and I'm having a ball. And the interesting thing is that as it has been videoed, the person videoing has been doing a split screen. So if you watch this, you can see how we interact with each other, how we really are colleagues, collegially making the music. We're looking at each other at times, and you can see the head moving just a little bit or something, communicating to the other person, okay, let's bend and wiggle here. Here we go, you know. And this is delightful. It's also modeling something I think really wonderful that people have been talking to us about, that they have noticed how much fun we have and how much we do interact and creatively interact at the moment, spontaneously. And I assure you it's at the moment spontaneously because there's not enough time to rehearse all this stuff. Not at all. So you just have to sort of do it. And that's been another parameter we have to accept here. And what does excellence mean? Does that mean that every note is played perfectly in exactly the right spot rhythmically? Or does it mean that the ethos of the piece is wonderfully projected and there are some wrong notes along the way? I remember in undergraduate school, this pianist came to do an artist recital. And there were quite a few wrong notes. And I had a piano lesson the next day with one of the big shots in the piano department. I was his only non-pianist as a student. So he treated me as a pianist, which was horrible because I had to work my tail off. Anyways, I came in and his first question was, what did you think about the recital? So of course here was this arrogant sophomore student being very sophomoric and starting to complain about the wrong notes. And my teacher said to me, but John, didn't you hear how musically he played them? And he said, we asked him to come because we think he has been one of the finest musicians of our recent history. And we wanted people to get to hear his superb music making. And that's a really interesting question to think about. Sometimes perfection doesn't really communicate very well. And in fact, if you think about it, perfection actually gets boring. Why is it that live performance still is interesting? Well, because there's a sense of spontaneity about it. You never quite know what's going to happen, you know, including that the bottom half of a bassoon falls off or something. These things happen. Or once when I was playing with the Minnesota Orchestra, a Christmas concert that was to be done twice in succession, and so the orchestra players would come back and do it again, one player, a very important percussion player, forgot. And so I didn't realize anything was going on except that there was this nonverbal communication going between the conductor and the percussion section. And the conductor was sort of going, you know, like this, and the people back there playing were going, no problem, no problem. You know. I didn't even realize what was going on until we started doing it. And all of a sudden, different people were playing different instruments. And there was this choreography as they were dancing around, where otherwise, of course, that wouldn't have happened. It came out fine, but it certainly was different. Certainly was different. Yes. So that spontaneity and also that understanding of how we communicate sometimes trumps perfection. And that's an important thing to think about. So anyways, that's part of what I'm doing. I'm having a great fun time writing psalm antiphons and psalm tones for four people, which is very different from thinking in terms of writing a psalm tone, a psalm antiphon for a choir of 60, which is their norm. It's rather hard to have a bass section divisi if you only have one bass. So one of my favorite things are these rich chords down there, you know, with some of the basses singing the fifth, and maybe the tenors, the tonic, and then the fifth again here, and ooh, wow, you know. I can't do that. So how am I going to do it? What am I going to do? Has my language, has my musical vocabulary expanded? Because I've discovered I have to have new ways to sing the same song. And I think that's something we always should be looking for, new ways to sing the same song. And that does not mean that we give up on the old ways, I have to hasten to add. That's not it at all. It's just constantly sort of massaging the parameters. Music should be like nature. If you sit under a willow tree on a hot day like today, you will discover that those little leaves are moving. They are not just hanging there, they're moving. And in nature, there's always this sort of subtle kinds of changes going on. So especially, I think, in playing the organ, we need to be aware of that, because it's pretty easy to just put your hands down and it'll keep going until someone doesn't pay the light bill. And so it becomes rather important to think about, how does the organ become more real? Because in the real world, there really isn't any permanence the way an organ can hold a chord for a long while. So, interesting question. And I think right now, when we're in a situation where we don't have a choir, more of the load falls on the organist to be communicating these subtle sort of changes. And how do we do that? I never play any adjacent stanzas in a hymn the same way. It usually would be very, very rare. Slight registrational changes, not big ones. But now maybe I'm trying to be even more colorful, but as I mentioned earlier, but not as loud. Because I don't have 60 people singing with me, let alone the congregation. And this congregation still really sings. It's a delight to play there, because they get the idea right away, and off they go. And I can quit playing and do all these crazy things I would do in a hymn festival, and they just sing on. That's just fine.
We've had a couple questions for either you or Chris come in the chat box. So if I can just break in here a little bit. First one was, how do we keep the rest of the choir engaged if we are only using 4 singers who are the most comfortable singing one on a part? Good question.
Should we answer that one first?
Sure.
Well, I guess my answer would be, the 4 people is because we have no choice. It's not because that's a preference. You can't invite the choir to the choir loft right now. We have a choir of over 60 people, pretty regular, so that the roster is even bigger, but the choir loft is such that the max we could have, if we're going to do the required distancing, is 35 people. So it's not a matter of one or the other, it's a matter of we have no choice right now. I think that we'll be wonderfully delighted if we can welcome the choirs back. But even then, we may have to find that we're going to have to do some adjusting, that maybe a choir becomes 2 chamber choirs, depending upon the individual choir and the size of the group and all of that. So for me, it's not a problem at all. We have no choice right now.
Some of the answers in the chat box, again, that different people recording different parts of pieces or hymns to rotate through. I have a bunch of colleagues who are doing that. It may be that as the season comes back, also that if you're going to hold online rehearsals, that maybe even parts of, if you have paid section leaders or people who are capable and willing, or if you're, depending on how you can split your time, using some of those stronger singers to also help the others. And I know that it's one way, and as far as the sound goes, we haven't figured out the technology yet to do it well with synchronous singing together. But I think taking advantage and changing the venue, this screen of 150 people gets overwhelming and taxing, especially if people are doing it all day. So finding ways to do little chunks of things with different leadership also makes it more enticing and invigorating for them. And it spreads out what you might be responsible for. And it could be that your collaborators aren't as good a leader as you. In fact, it's probably pretty likely that they're not going to lead as well as you, and they might not get as much done as you, but they can give and they can do, and that's another way to stay connected. Someone also asked, you brought this up, Ferg, in talking about your keyboard collaborator, which, and this is another question that we had talked about, which is, what are some suggestions on how to keep the chemistry, the ministry between musicians and staff? And so I think that's one part of it, but also, and maybe that will blossom into the importance of colleagues and collegiality and relationships in this profession, in this vocation. Maybe could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think there's no doubt that in my situation, this time that we're in right now has been in some ways a gift. I'm not required to go to choir rehearsals because Lorna does that. And on Sunday morning, she plays for the choir, normally anyways. Once in a while, I will say, hey, I'd love to play this accompaniment. It's one of my favorite pieces. And Lorna is very gracious, and she says, well, sure, Ferg, it's all yours. And oftentimes, I'm turning pages for her and adding or subtracting stops for her because I don't quite like what it was sounding like. And she always says to me, oh, that was so much better than I had. What were you doing? And so then we have a chance to talk it through. And that kind of thing can happen even more now because we can be doing it informally in a recording session. Right now, we're not recording, so we can stop and talk about it. If you're doing it live, or if you're doing it on Sunday morning, you can't sort of stop in the middle of something and post-mort and experiment with it. So we're both growing, I think, because now we can do this together. And I think the other thing that has to be talked about here is that we all have to agree that we're vulnerable. And so this is not the boss talking to the slaves. No, we're all doing this together. And the more we can put each other at ease, the better this is going to be. And I think that's really important. And it's, you know, what we should be doing anyways. But sometimes in the rush of things, we don't. We don't think to do it as gently maybe as we could. And so I think that's very important. Lorna and I are just having a blast together. It's really wonderful. And I've reimagined the delight of piano and organ. I'm even thinking of trying some arrangements myself. And this is such a shock to the other me, but it's worked really well. And I'm grateful to have a colleague who is wonderfully engaging and wonderfully modest. And it reminds me that that's part of the robe that I should put on. There should be a stole of modesty as part of what I wear and what I then act like. That's terribly important. And right now we can build those kinds of relationships which maybe in the helter-skelter rush of a normal situation there was no time to do. And so that's another thing that we can creatively think in terms of letting this situation be a chance for us to grow in different ways, or to grow faster, or to build relationships where before there wasn't the time to do that. And so I think that's a really interesting thing to think about. Sometime, Dr. Aspaas, before we finish, we should talk just a little bit about text. And then we have a little improvisation that we're going to do for you that we mustn't forget when we are talking about text. So we need to get into that.
You had mentioned the possibility of a piano, some piano and organ arranging. There's already some support in the chat window for such an adventure.
Okay.
So you might want to talk with Jane about how that's going to work. But the whole concept of composing, arranging, you get a commission, or you're finding a need for a piece for choir. How does that all start with you? Where does it begin? Because that's probably one of the biggest questions that I think anyone who is thinking about creating as an arranger or as a composer is gosh, where do you even start? I have an itch, but I don't even know where.
Sometimes if it's a commission, I'm helped because the commissionee would like it to be this text or this tune, something like that, and that's helpful. Many times, though, it is, we just want you to do a piece. And then I think I just have to start asking questions. Is this a hymn concertato and you want the congregation to be involved at some point? Is this a solo choir piece? Who do you have in your choir? Is it 60 people with 20 people with music degrees, or is it 10 people and they take recordings home so they can hear the parts and practice them? I had a Catholic nun who was at a wonderful parish called in New Prague, and her choir members included one farmer who was so dedicated. He would record the choir rehearsals and play them back in his tractor while he was plowing or doing whatever, so he could sing along and learn the parts. Now that's what I call commitment. So, you know, the range is all over the place here, and I think we just have to figure out how we're going to work within the context of what's given us. The other thing that I think about with the text is there something in the text that might generate a musical move? So the text is the most important thing. Church music to me begins with text, but the music carries the freight. The music is what takes the text and breaks it open on another level. And that's because I consider music to be another language. It's a very different language. It's not precise in the way English or German or whatever could be, but it is a language. And so we need to be thinking about how things work, how people typically respond to various moves that one might make as a composer, arranger, whatever. And so the text always gets me going. I love it when someone says, would you write something using this text and this tune? Because then half of my work is done. Because that already provides what? A discipline, some parameters in which to work. It's much harder, I think, to wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to write music today, and sit down at the piano or in front of your computer or however you do it and say, now what? Or as I say sometimes about people who talk about improvisation, because they don't see the practicing that goes into learning how to improvise well, they assume it's some kind of magic. Here's the theme. Okay. And then we play it once on the organ. Did I get that right? Okay. And then we improvise. No, we've practiced how we're going to take whatever is given to us and make something out of it, organize it. There are procedures in music. You know, you have phrases, you have cadences, and whether you're writing like the style of Bach or writing like the style of Penderecki, there are concepts that you employ to deal with this passing of time, which is what happens in the art of music, which is so fascinating. Most arts are static, they're done. But in the theater and in music making, the process moves on through time. So we've added another dimension. And so one of the challenges also then is to control the passing of time. So that's wonderful when someone gives you a tune, because the passing of time has been, to a certain extent, already taken care of. You have to work within that frame that's already there. Then I look in text for things that are interesting. So this is where sometimes people have said they think that I'm a lot like F. Melius Christiansson, who loved to use text painting. And if you listen to some of his wonderful pieces, you can hear this kind of thing. Wake, awake, you hear the chariots rolling. In O Day Full of Grace, the piece begins and it's a sunrise. It's the musical sunrise, just as clear as can be. And so the composer has responded to the Geist, to the core, to the central idea or value of the text. So the Church's One Foundation is a hymn about let's get together. What is this problem we are having all the time when we seem to not be able to get together ecumenically or even within a parish? My hypothetical parish is St. Swithin's in the Swamp. Yes, okay. So at St. Swithin's, why can't we agree? Why can't we agree to disagree but still love each other? All of those kinds of questions. And that's what that text is talking about. Well, there's one stanza which I really love. And the interesting thing about this is many hymnals don't include this stanza. LBW and ELW did, but many hymnals don't. And that's in the ELW at 654. Though with a scornful wonder this world sees her oppressed, by schisms rent asunder, by heresies distressed. And oh boy, did that text ever turn on my creative juices. And so now I had done a concertato on this, and there are choir stanzas and congregational stanzas. The third stanza is for everyone, and there's brass and organ going and everything. So Chris Aspaas is going to be everyone, and he's going to sing the text, and I'm going to be the first trumpet. Here we go.
Though with a scornful wonder this
Ba 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 ba
by schemes rent us
ba ba beep ba ba beep ba ba beep ba ba ba, etc., etc. Obviously, the first trumpet player couldn't count and got lost and came in wrong. But of course, what the trumpet player is really doing is what? Reflecting the idea of schisms, which rent us asunder. It is so much fun to do this on the road with a group of brass players who have never seen it before. And invariably, we get to the third stanza, and the first trumpet comes in, and of course, he doesn't have a full score with him, or she, and they stop immediately because, oh dear, I must have counted wrong. So I have to tell them, no, you're right. And by the way, you weren't playing loud enough either. and so the first trumpet player is schismatic. And that's sort of, what should we say, the ultimate example of text painting, but it works. It works. And there are all kinds of other examples of text painting. If you take Joy to the World and just embellish it, da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da, dee-da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da. That's so joyful, and right away you can make a little toccata out of that without even half trying, and so I've done that. It's published somewhere. Oh, I guess, no, I don't think it's by Augsburg, but that's okay. I suppose they'll forgive me. But this is what I think is one of the great things that we can do. We can be creators. We can be on-the-spot creators as the Holy Spirit moves us on Sunday, if we just have the courage to let go, or the courage to have practiced and experimented. So if an idea hits us, we can try it out safely and not have the congregation go into cardiac arrest. And that's an important pastoral issue we have to think about. And some people get a little too carried away. And I'm going to blow my own horn, but it was really interesting. The college pastor, Bruce Benson, with whom I worked for all 29 years, well, almost all 29 years. Wonderful, wonderful guy. One Sunday morning, no, I guess it was a weekday morning, I was going to play daily chapel, and I reported for duty a little early, like I always did, and stuck my nose in the campus pastor's office and said, anything I need to know. And he said, well, not about today, but I've got to tell you about last weekend. I was at a conference for college ministers. And all these guys and gals were talking with me about how much trouble they were having with their organist. And it was so hard to sing with the organist because the organist was always doing crazy things and they were getting lost and confused. And Bruce said, I said to them, well, I never have any trouble singing with our organist, and I know he's doing things. So then the question is, what's going on? And my solution, my answer is, what I do is modest enough that it doesn't lead us down a false path. And so that's something to remember. Often and always with my students, when we have church service playing classes or improv classes, I talk about less is more. Less is more. And that's the interesting thing to remember. Now, Jane may want to talk to us pretty soon here, because we're going to end this session. We've been talking now almost an hour. I see that we have 8 minutes left before it's 3 o'clock. Our plan is that we really shouldn't leave in your ears with the two of us singing schismatically. So we have a recording that we'd like to share from a hymn festival that happened in Bow Chapel. And it was a biggie. The church was full. We had brass, we had organ, we had Orff instruments, we had percussion instruments. We sang with African style things. We did all kinds of things, folk music things. We had choirs from area churches numbering around 250, and we had the choir that I conducted, the Cantorai, as the core choir, and we had a blast. And so we're going to share my arrangement of Joyful, Joyful, We Adore Thee as this group sang it. But I think we still have a few minutes. Jane, is there anything you think we should quickly cover?
Boy, there has been a lot of chat in the chat box with good ideas, things that various people are doing. So yes, we will end the session at 3 o'clock for those of you who need to get off and do other things. But we can, and we'll end with this hymn, because I know we're all missing the traditional hymn festival that we normally would do tonight. So we wanted to offer something. But if there are enough people who would like to continue conversation and stay on the line for a while, after that hymn, we'll keep the meeting open for a while and see what other questions or conversation comes on. How's that?
It's okay with us.
Okay.
Well, shall we go ahead and cue up the video? I'd like to say one or two things about this before you start, David. This is a typical Ferg concertato with congregation involved, in this case in the first stanza and the last stanza, and the middle stanza is for the choir. And then I decided to tack a little introduction on it as well, where the choir sings "Make a Joyful Noise to the Lord," a little bit of that psalm, and then we go into Joyful, Joyful. So just so you know what's going to happen, so you're ready for it. And now I think we can do it.
Go ahead and mute.
That's a hymn festival. Awesome, thank you. And I look forward to, and I'm sure all you do, to seeing full churches like that again and being able to sing full-throated like that. So this will conclude our day today. We'll be back at 10 o'clock Central Time tomorrow with Chris Aspaas and our, there he is with our choral selections. And you'll be able to wail away at home as we sing along with some scrolling videos. Thank you, Ferg, especially. This is the last we'll hear from Ferg today. More from Chris tomorrow. So for those of you who need to leave, please go ahead. And for those of you who want to stay, we'll keep it open for a little bit longer and see what other questions come up or comments. While that hymn was playing, I was trying to copy the chat room and paste it into a document, but that didn't work. Pearl had suggested screenshots to save it. David, have you figured out a way yet to export those?
Well, unfortunately, in this day and age that we lived in, one of the things that we're very concerned about is the privacy of the people that are participating. And so we did not give participants the opportunity to be able to download the chat pod. And so that's just a protection, one of the many protections that we built into this particular meeting. I'm pretty sure that we'll be able to have access to the comments after this meeting is over. And after Zoom processes the meeting and makes a recording of it, and we'll look in the meeting reports and see if we can pull up the chat pod for anybody who would be interested in having it. I mean, if somebody would like the chat record, maybe drop us a note here in the chat pod, and we could see what we can do about getting that to you.
Yeah, I was wondering, Jim says this, if you archive this recording, the chat box should be in the recording. And I wondered about that too. Mm-hmm. But getting back to the question, the actual questions that are coming in, any comments on the upcoming hymnal, All Creation Sings? And I have to say that early on, before this whole COVID business started, our plan had been to build the hymn festival around hymns in All Creation Sings, which is the new hymnal supplement coming out for the ELCA. So Ferg received a very early kind of document about hymns that were in there. I don't even know if you remember any of that or would like to comment on it. Ferg. David Sims, if you are still on the line, I'd appreciate it if you would, or Jen Baker Trinity, I saw you were on. If you could give a few remarks about the hymnal. They were both very, very heavily involved in producing this, which we've delayed the arrival of this new resource to November now. I mean, can you think of a worse time to bring out a new hymnal? What are the chances? So Ferg or David or Jen, they may have.
Well, I can help a little bit. In fact, I had a talk with David Sims, was it yesterday, about the new book, because we're thinking about whether we should be ordering it right away or what we're going to do. And just for kicks, what I think we're going to do is what many people have done in other situations. We're going to buy enough for the choir, the adult choir and the high school choir, and so maybe 100 books. And then they'll start using it, and we'll do some things as anthems, just straight out of the book, no special fussing or anything, and then sort of see how we like it and what we're finding in there that we'd like to share with the congregation, and then probably later would go ahead and get the book for the pews. That's over 400, so you think twice before you do that. David told me that the size of the book, both the physical size of the book and the contents, will be a lot like With One Voice. It's going to be about the same size as With One Voice, and it's going to have about 200 hymns in it, just like With One Voice did. Then it will also have some new liturgies, new setting of the Holy Communion service and some things like that in the front of the book. So in a sense, it's like a little ELW in the way it's organized and what's in there, except of course it's not going to be as comprehensive. Some of the hymns will be brand new in the sense that they have not been printed very many places, and especially in hardback hymnals in any denomination. Others will be hymns that have been used, that may have appeared in other hardbound hymnals, but that have not appeared for whatever reason in ELW or even LBW, but seem to be things that have relevance, that have musical and textual weight and are worth using. And so those will be also in the book. So it's a variety of things. I don't have, Jane, maybe you can help out here, I don't have a table of contents of the hymns. Now, is that online? Is that available now?
It is on our website. If you just go to Augsburg Fortress and then put in All Creation Sings, you'll see, and that list is finally final.
So it would be there. Okay. Another question, are we allowed to talk about next year?
Sure, with great hope and expectation.
Well, yeah, and we always have to know that who knows what's going to happen. But the present plan is that next year we'll have a sort of special emphasis on the St. Olaf Choral Series, because it's, I guess, the 50th anniversary of that series. It's a significant day, significant year in the history of that. So Anton Armstrong will be the choral clinician, and I'm going to be the organ clinician, substituting for someone else who had to back out. But it probably makes good sense that I'm involved because I'm the co-editor with Anton of the current St. Olaf Choral Series. And we will be doing a hymn festival and talking with Martin Seltz about that, just, brainstorming a bit. For sure, we will incorporate things from the new supplement, but probably not devote the whole program to the new supplement. Martin thinking that it might be better to have a balance between existing hymnal things and new things, because then folks that don't have the new resource yet could still go away with ideas that they might take home and use in their local church. The other thing about next year that absolutely delights me is that the Minneapolis area clinic will be at Normandale Lutheran Church. And I will be so delighted with David Clark to be your hosts at the church. It's proven to be a wonderful place for me, and I think you will enjoy being there. There are only, let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6 fine grand pianos, including 3 Steinways. And of course, the wonderful instrument in the sanctuary. Numerous different meeting rooms large enough to house substantial portions of the people there, so we can be doing things simultaneously in all kinds of creative ways. So we're really looking forward as a church to being able to host you as you're going to come and try out Normandale. And so that's the end of the commercial.
David, could you flash up that your slide on next year's dates and locations? And, hopefully we're going to meet in person and have our display of music and travel around the country.
One comment while David is finding that, if he can find it. Jane and I have agreed, traveling around the country that she just said is what made me think of this. Jane and I have agreed that preparing for what we are doing now has been much more extensive, time-consuming, and nerve-wracking than doing the 6 sites on the road has been. And since I've done the 6 sites on the road twice now, I think, I couldn't agree more after having done this too. And there's Chris Aspaas laughing. Yeah, he knows too, because he's done it on the road.
Yep. Although I have to say, you know, I was afraid that this has been so much more work and would be so less rewarding, but actually it's been a very good day, and I'm so thankful for all the participation from all of you who have signed on and have been, you know, using that chat box and giving us feedback. So that's really been much better than I was expecting.
Jane, have you seen anything pop up in the chat box?
Oh, there's stuff popping up all the time here.
Ah, I didn't scroll all the way down. Oh, here comes the dates.
There we go. Okay. So we go Twin Cities, Columbia, South Carolina, Chicago area, Seattle area, Philadelphia area, Columbus, Ohio. And I think I have confirmed all of these dates and locations except Seattle was a little timid to commit because they're, since the passing of Norma Ahmed Nelson, they're without a musician at the moment. So put that in your calendar, and hopefully we will see you all then.
Did you do that? I'm not at this point seeing the chat room stuff.
Hover over the bottom of your screen first.
Gotcha. Found it.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, yeah, I've seen these.
Jane, this is David. David Sims is available, I believe, if we wanted to bring him in to talk a little bit about All Creation Sings.
David Sims, please unmute yourself and tell us about the hymnal.
And I've got to exit that screen.
Where are you, David?
Well, maybe I misspoke.
I'm here. Can you see me now?
Yes. Hello, David.
Hello. What would you like to know about All Creation Sings?
First of all, where we are in the process, and your experience. This is David's first experience with getting out a hymnal.
Yeah, so we are at the point where we have cleared all the permissions and licenses to know what's in the book. And so the Pew edition, we think everything, we know where it fits. It's sort of like a puzzle where you say, you know, how many hymns do we have and what sections and what needs to be on a facing page so that the pages, you know, if there's enough room for everything. So we think we have that all laid out. Then that means that we know what order the accompaniment edition can be in. So then we have to figure out the long hymns that have a lot of accompaniments and a lot of verses, what pages those go on. And so we're at the stage where we get to finally look at proofs of them. And so the next stage is that we'll start sending things to the printer. And yeah, it's exciting. We're talking about how do we teach about it in this time when we can't be together. So we're thinking about webinars or videos. We've made a list of people who may have works in the hymnal or know about that genre really well, who could demonstrate it and teach about it a little bit. So that will be coming out this fall. Everything will release on November 17th, the 3 principal editions. And then next year, we'll have the guitar edition that will come out, and everything will be loaded onto Sundays and Seasons as soon as we can. So it's so exciting. There are 2 new liturgy settings, one that's bilingual English and Spanish. One is Holy Communion and includes options for evening worship, so that you don't just try to have to take hold in evening prayer and add communion to it. There'll be a setting that might be specifically for that. There's a prayer for a more contemplative service. So that's just been a really exciting time, and really fun to figure out how to do it when all of us are in our own homes. So we are on these 5-hour, these 5-way video chats where each of us has a set of proofs in front of us, and we have to go line by line and talk about it out loud. But I'm glad for this time to bring these things to the church as a whole, and I'm really excited about that. So that's my 2-minute spiel about the hymnal.
David, there's a question. Did we have to remove any hymns by David Haas?
We did. We only had one. Dust and Ashes was in the hymnal, but we removed that and found something else that would actually fit in that same spot, so we didn't have to renumber anything. So yeah, we were able to get that in time.
Thank you. David is actually on vacation this week, so appreciate you coming into the meeting today. Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Yeah, absolutely.
David, if I may, because of the circles I run in, I was watching how the Church of Norway was bringing a new hymnal to their congregations, and they did it devotionally. They've got the Salma book minute by minute, and choirs from all over Norway were assigned one of the hymns.
Oh,
and
yeah.
they were videos that were devotional videos that were kind of released kind of as like daily devotions, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. If you don't know, Paul Friesen-Karper and his wife have started a community hymnal page on Facebook, and every night they or some of their friends lead a hymn online. So that's just another great example of ways that people are figuring out how to sing. Households take that within themselves. We've had some ideas that we can encourage churches to buy All Creation Sings just for their choirs and send it to your choir members. So now you bought 30 copies and you sent them out to your choir members, or you bought 5 copies, however many people you have. And then you could start to learn the hymns as a choir on Zoom, or in your go outside and talk about them, or however you do that. And then when you get to come back to church, whenever that is, your choir already has these resources that they have lived with, and they can help start teach that to the whole congregation. You can do that with ELW as well. That might be another way of staying connected, is to use that choir network and have those things at home with you that remind you of being in church together.
Another question that came in is, and Chris was trying to answer this, about copyright and Zoom. Let me find it. And so he was asking, in what regard are you concerned regarding copyright, sharing of scores, recordings, etc.? Chris, if you would just tell us what you know about copyright and Zoom.
Not nearly as much as perhaps Jeff O'Donnell, who's sitting in the room with Ferg, but the hand, I love it. But I guess if Zoom is being used to communicate directly to congregations, it would be similar to any other live stream. But again, I don't know the exact details of it, and many of you deal with streaming licenses and things like that I don't necessarily deal with in person. Our administration deals with that sort of thing. So I was just curious as to what the actual specifics were of concern. As far as playing playing a piece of music on my end for my students or leading something, then we're good, because we're in rehearsal. We're using it just like we would rehearsal. And again, I think Jim just shared the streaming license through CCLI, and one license pretty well covers Zoom worship, probably in the same way that YouTube, etc. So if you have that licensing, you're likely okay. Again, as long as it happens and then it goes away.
Any other comments or questions for either Chris or Ferg, or just for the good of the community?
A bunch of people were talking about, like Carol had brought up, looking for canons. People were talking, and David just shared about using the hymnal for the choir, and different people on the chat talking about that. Maybe Ferg, I'm wondering. Well, I'm biased. One of my earlier church jobs, we had a worship committee meeting every month, and I was a relatively new church musician leading my first adult big boy choir, and it came up that I had programmed an anthem for Christmas Eve where I knew half my choir was going to leave and the adult children of the other half of the choir were going to join for one 35-minute rehearsal for 2 anthems and a couple little bits of service music. And so I did my introduction to what we were planning for Advent Christmas by saying, and for Christmas Eve, I've chosen a couple of anthems that are really accessible because of our short period of time. And there was a response to it about the concern for excellence in regard to accessibility not being having or containing excellence. Ferg, what are your thoughts?
You already know what I'm going to say. At least I think you do. First of all, though, a word about Christmas. In the parishes I served part-time in Kent, Ohio for 15 years, and then Central Lutheran Church for 5, in both cases for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, we had ad hoc choirs. So the core of those ad hoc choirs were the members of the regular choir, the high school choir and the adult choir, who were at home for Christmas. But they were encouraged to bring relatives who were visiting with them if they sang in their local church choir. And other people who were in town or who knew about this, other people in the parish who normally couldn't sing because of whatever reason, but were singers and would like to do this. And then we would have 2 rehearsals. Then it would depend a lot upon the calendar, when Christmas falls in the week, which would inform when people are traveling and when this might make the most sense. The second of these rehearsals was Christmas Eve, so we would come early, pardon me, and do this, and this worked very well. And then you just don't pick things that are as hard. But there's a difference between how hard something is and how hard you try to do anything well. And the important thing with me is not how difficult the piece is per se. The important thing for me is to be sure that we work as hard as we can to make what we are going to do really fine. So you can do something like Torches by John Joubert, which is essentially 3 stanzas of the same tune, hardly anything else to do, and you just work on that until you get it polished and nice. But learning notes is not an issue because it's pretty obvious and pretty simple. Pardon me. And I think that's a good solution to keep in mind. And it really works pretty well. The other thing that we did in Minneapolis was on Christmas Day, we had a family choir. So we did, 2 or 3 things, and we probably used some Orff instruments because that was a different sound and made it interesting. And the whole family was encouraged to come. If you had children in the children's choir and you in the adult choir, well then, all of you were there, and we just did our thing. Again, things that would not be super difficult, maybe things just out of the hymnal with a little bit of dressing up that I might include, like an Orff accompaniment or something like this. And the idea is not so much that we're worried about the difficulty of a piece or the name of the composer of a piece. It seems to me that church music historically has often evolved from the people. And so folk song music of the people is just wonderful. And many of the tunes that are very beloved from the standpoint of Christmas are not written by major composers. They're very simple and accessible because they're folk music. And for me, that's what a lot of church music is, even though if it has composers and all of that, it's still not that difficult musically as far as the notes are concerned. And then you can take anything, including something like Jesus Loves Me, the children's Sunday school song, and you can make sure that it is sung beautifully. Intonation, quality of tone, all vowels shaped the same. There are all kinds of things that you can work on, and you can take it to become really very lovely and very gorgeous, depending upon the skill set of all your people and what they're used to doing. But the essential core of what you're doing does not necessarily have to be written by a fine composer or be, quote, technically difficult for it to be a challenge. The important thing is to do whatever you're doing as well as you possibly can do it. Does that help at all? Chris?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, sir. I actually had another question, which is to say that there are still 88 participants on the call. There were upwards of 150. There's probably a goodly number that have arranged something for their choir or a small ensemble, or deranged something for a choir or a small ensemble. I know it took me a long time to venture into the world of actually composing. So, because I believed that was left up to Brahms, because he's pretty good. Comes up with some catchy tunes. And I thought there's all these good tunes out there, but do you have any brief advice for any of us who maybe we have a little extra time, and or we have a very special situation in that our ensemble is now, again, small. Maybe it's a quartet. Maybe we need some special things, whether it's antiphons or service music or whatever. Do you have suggestions for the kernel things to think about as we start?
You're asking me. Okay. First of all, I think we have a great advantage. Going back to one of the things I said during our session, church music is text. So if we have a text, we already have a shape. We have so many words that need to be said. We also have a spirit, a Geist, the sense of what this is about, which can inform what we're doing. You probably don't think of scoring Abide With Me, the hymn that we know, for brass, quintet, timpani, and snare drum, because that's not the Geist, that's not the spirit of that. So a lot of our problem, our challenges as a composer, a lot of that is solved because we are presented with the responsibility of setting a text. And that helps a lot. If we have a tune as well, then even more of the responsibility has been taken away from us, or relieved, maybe that's a better word, so that we can sort of focus on the other things. I personally think that a wonderful place to start experimenting with free composition.
I don't know the name.
Are you there? I'm keeping going. Okay. One of the great things to try working on are psalm antiphons, because they don't have to be long. I think the most difficult thing in composition, not having a given melody or whatever, is dealing with the passage of time. And so the text can limit the time, especially if we take something like an antiphon. So I would go and do something like that and start with writing antiphons, or writing psalm settings, writing a new psalm tone, and then figuring out how you might want to harmonize it. Looking at one of the existing psalm tones. I rarely, if ever, play any of the accompaniments given for the psalm tones in ELW. I do my own, frankly, because I don't like the ones that are in the book. And so I just go ahead and do my own, and I don't see any reason why someone couldn't try that out. And you know, For many of us, I think our basic instincts are better than we think. And especially if you've been around church music making, and especially some experiences with good literature in that context, then you sort of know what you need to do. You just need to feel encouraged to try it. And then maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to share it with a friend. Okay, I wrote this. What do you think? I often will have a piece and get it, while I was at school, get it pretty well along, and then I'd bring it to choir, and we'd sing it. And then I would say something like, you know, I don't know how to end this thing. How do you think we should end it? And we had a meeting of the whole, and had a little committee meeting there. Well, try this, or do that, or whatever. And it was an absolute delight, because it got them involved very healthily in thinking more deeply about the structure, how you express yourself, all these kinds of things that will inform how they sing any piece they're doing, not just the one we're struggling with right now for Ferg because he can't figure it out. So I would encourage that kind of thing. Oft times, even back in Kent, Ohio, before I was doing so much writing for publication, I would come up with an idea and then I would try it out with the choir on Wednesday night and do it with the choir before I did it on Sunday. And that was good for two reasons. One, it meant I had to have it in shape. So it had to be ready to go, which meant that I had from Thursday, Friday, and Saturday to polish what I discovered I couldn't do well on Wednesday night with the choir, number one. Number two, I think one of your most, rigorous audiences will be the choir. Not because they want to be picky and choosy and nasty, but because they care about you. And you know they care about you, so you're very worried that you're caring about them when you try something of yours on them. Is it wasting their time? That's not fair. And so this works both ways. So those would be a few things I would say anyways. Probably prayer could help too.
And if I could request from all the composers, Ferg and Chris, and I saw Kyle Haugen and Prince Organ, probably some others. We are getting slammed with requests for solo music, vocal solo, solo instrumental with piano or keyboard, because this is what everybody is using. And you know, we came up to Easter Sunday and no big choir anthem, no big brass ensemble. We need solos. Well, we didn't have any solos for Easter.
I know that My Redeemer Liveth might have worked.
I heard that word. And so Evelyn Larder is providing us with 3 Easter solos, which are quite nice and will be available, I think, for download. I'm not sure exactly how or when it will be coming out, but that's the kind of thing I think we all need right now. So there's your assignment. Okay, there's still 78 people on here. You want to continue? Do you have more? Do you have anything you hoped to get an answer for that you have not heard resolved yet? Not that we can resolve everything. If not, or if Chris and Ferg are talked out at this point, I think we can go ahead and end the meeting. Carol Kimmel says, have folks been having Zoom rehearsals? Well, okay, looks like we're going to keep going.
I know at least especially in the college and university world, a lot of folks have been doing Zoom. There is an add-on, it's called Clean Feed, which works through Google Chrome. You register for an account, but it's free. And you can run it alongside Zoom. So you use Zoom for the video and Clean Feed for the audio. And the sound is really quite good. And the latency is better. There are no current technological solutions that have zero latency, but Clean Feed is one word, which people have done. And a number of church colleagues in town have been doing them. What I know about the Zoom is to keep it short. Like you might normally have an hour and 15 minutes on Wednesday night or Thursday night. Don't do that. Small groups, use breakout rooms, use different kinds of leadership, send part tracks, basically use the time. And even what I'm planning to do with, we just registered for my students that are coming back are either in person or online. And I have a very small group that are going to be online. Well, now I'm planning for them, which is small, short sessions where I'm sharing information about the piece. I might be playing the piece. There's also something called is it Internet MIDI? I just got an email about it, that plays from a MIDI keyboard directly into the feed, which is a better sound. It doesn't have to process from the real sound into digital. It's straight digital, so it's a better latency and a better sound for your singers. But don't expect the kind of back and forth. It's still one way. They might ask a question, but then it's still one way. So keep it short, break it up, and again, think about things that are going to be accessible. So because I think if our singers find success, they will put up with the screen. But if we are just on the struggle bus and getting run over and backed again and run over and backed again, it's painful for us, it's painful for them. So I would just say, communicate, be creative, really tiny little chunks, give them things to work on asynchronously so that if you do have time with them synchronously, you can take advantage of it. But people are exploring every day what the options are. So just what I would say is keep communicating, stay in the forums. ACDA has a resource for singers. The divisions of ACDA have a number of, Western Division is a great resource page for all different levels, whether it's church, community, elementary, middle, high, college, university, community, professional, you name it. They have had breakouts. There's research coming out of UC Boulder about aerosolization, singing instruments. I just shared a PDF about preliminary things regarding instruments that are coming out. July 26th is the date for that, the rest of that information to come out. We have really smart people working on this. So I would just say, stay in touch, communicate with each other, look to your professional organizations, look to places like AF, look around and make sure that you're staying with your ear to the rail about how we can do this, because we have to. There's not really another choice. So.
Chris, I was actually surprised by Dr. Yisan Kwan, our music director at the church that I attend. She teaches music and teaches individual keyboard lessons, and she has a piece of software that was free. I could download it as if I were a student, but what she was able to do was she was able to play from her studio into my MIDI keyboard as if she was accompanying the music that we were recording from church, and doing that on Facebook Live and Zoom and stuff like that. It was an amazing sound, and she was just playing from her studio on my keyboard.
I think the one-on-one, so for private applied lessons, for one-on-one meetings with singers, or with small groups that are gathered on a screen, I think the options for better two-way communication are there. And so, yeah, and it's developing, and I don't think it has to be expensive, and I don't think you have to pay $2,000 for a subscription. We need this stuff. People are making it. So yeah, absolutely. So the use of, I wish I could remember the name. I'm going to take a second and look at my screen and see if I can dig it up about the Internet MIDI thing.
Okay. I think maybe we're ready to wrap it up for today. Boy, this has, well, I'll just repeat what Carol Banach said. This has really been fabulous. Thank you to all the speakers. And I will confess that, and I told David this morning that I had really low expectations for this, and it far exceeded that. But I think this has really been good, and I'm glad we were able to do it, and I'm glad so many of you signed on, and I hope it was a positive experience. We'll rejoin tomorrow at 10 a.m. Central Time. That's 11 o'clock Eastern Time. I know we're having trouble with time zones. And it'll be Chris Aspaas taking us through new choral music. And we'll be using the scrolling videos. And I have been going through the videos and singing along, and actually it's quite fun. So we'll gather again tomorrow. Thank you, Ferg, especially since we won't see you tomorrow. It's
You are most welcome. Most welcome indeed.
You have no idea how hard Ferg and his team at Normandale worked to get all those videos done. So good. All right, I think we'll sign off and hopefully see you all tomorrow morning. Thanks.